Today's episode of Marijuana Today Daily is brought to you by our friends over at the Gateway Cannabis Incubator, the leading marijuana startup accelerator around. Learn more about the ideas they've helped bring to life and how to bring your own marijuana startup into the Gateway Circle by opening up gtwy.co. That's gtwy.co. Good morning, Marijuana Nation. It's Monday, October 23rd, 2017, and you're tuned in to episode 357 of Marijuana Today Daily. I'm your host, Shay Gunther, and I'll be walking you through today's marijuana news and headlines. As always, we have a full and busy day of cannabis news in our hands, so let's jump right into it. Before we jump into the news today, I want to read a great email that I got from listener Jason in Tennessee this weekend, who wrote, quote, "First off, I love the podcast. I really enjoy being able to keep up with the topics and what's going on in the war against marijuana. That being said, it's obvious you truly hate Trump, but come on, man. It seems like almost every episode lately you are making some kind of either dig or calling him racist or some type of political type comment on him. You do realize that there are a ton of Republicans and libertarians that are for full legalization. A lot of us listen to these podcasts to get away from the constant political poppycock. It's fine every now and again or when it's relevant, but over the past couple weeks, it seems like it's almost every episode. Thanks, Jason." Unquote. First off, I want to thank Jason for writing in. I absolutely love hearing feedback on the show, especially when there's good constructive criticism. To address his point, I definitely agree that President Trump has popped up here on the show a lot in recent weeks. But like I wrote to Jason last night after I first received his email, I'm kind of putting the blame on Trump for that. Regular listeners pick up pretty quickly, as Jason did, that I am about as far from a Trump fan as it gets. I think it's a travesty that he's president and have a lot of well thought out fears about the long-term damages he's done to our political institution. But at the same time, I don't want to fall into the trap of being anti-Trump with every headline. I'm dedicated first and foremost to the sacredness of the news, even as my activist roots bubble up every now and then. I don't ever want to make a mention or criticism of anyone unless it's part of the overall news narrative that I'm reporting on. I also appreciate the fact that marijuana legalization is a bipartisan issue and that there are plenty of right-leaning folks tuning into the show. I hope that my occasional progressive outbursts and focus on President Trump and his ilk don't drive you away. Maybe I could just be that one progressive voice you listen to that you don't tell your friends about. It'll be our liberal little secret. If you have any thoughts to share about this issue or any other issue, I welcome your feedback, which you can send to me at shay@mjtodaydaily.com. That's SHEA@mjtodaydaily.com. Thanks again to Jason from Tennessee for writing in and listening. All right, let's get to the news. Our top story of the day is the editorial published in today's edition of Maine's Portland Press Herald, calling for state lawmakers to fight against efforts by Governor Paul LePage to impose a year-long delay on rolling out the adult-use commercial marijuana system voted through by voters in the fall. I covered this story last week as the governor, working with Republican House Leader Ken Fredette, submitted a proposed bill to push back by one full year implementing adult-use sales. As the Press Herald's editorial correctly points out, Governor LePage actively sought to hinder the months-long process carried out by the legislative committee tasked with turning last year's ballot measure into working law, even as House Speaker Fredette mentions the governor's disengagement from the proceedings as a valid reason for the moratorium. Last week, the Los Angeles City Council unveiled a draft proposal for a plan for issuing marijuana business licenses in a way that gives advantage to the economically disadvantaged people who have been most negatively impacted by the war on marijuana. State law precludes municipalities from factoring race into licensing decisions, so the city instead focused on economics, crafting a plan that gives increasing levels of assistance depending on how closely candidate licensees fit certain criteria, with poor people with marijuana criminal convictions on their records being eligible for the highest levels. Some of the things that the city would help with are the logistics of license applications, the citing of commercial space, as well as assistance in expunging past criminal convictions. Los Angeles would even waive all business license fees and offer up low-interest loans. This is a good story to click over and read in full. I've said this lots, but we will have failed at legalization if we don't successfully address the racial and economic disparities inherent in the current system. Our final top story of the day is the news broken by New Cannabis Ventures as Alan Brockstein picked up on the story of Washington State and their transition to a new cannabis seed-to-sale tracking system. As Alan is reporting, things are not going well. Washington State announced back in May that it was switching over from BioTrack THC to MJ Freeway's new LEAF system to handle statewide tracking compliance for their legal marijuana industry. That 5-month window appears to be at least a few months too short because Washington State is announcing that marijuana cultivators, processors, and dispensers will have to, for the time being, track all cannabis passing through the system by hand using Excel spreadsheets the state is providing. The state is relaxing their rules requiring daily updates and is moving to weekly reporting. There's a particularly interesting angle in this one as BioTrack THC rejected a request by Washington State to provide service for the next few months while MJ Freeway catches up on installing their system, with BioTrack THC CEO Patrick Vo telling New Cannabis Ventures that it's because of the numerous security issues MJ Freeway was hit with earlier this year. This is another good one to dive into fully, especially if you're in Washington State's industry and need a link to the new reporting guidelines. Those are the top stories for today. It's time for Marijuana Today Daily Headlines Blitz. Before we blitz it in headlines, let's quickly thank our sponsor, Gateway Cannabis Incubator. If you have a great legal cannabis startup idea and are ready to take things to the next level, you should swing over to gtwy.co to learn more about their program. Successful Gateway entrepreneurs move to Oakland for at least 4 months to work on their idea and get $50,000 in startup cash in exchange for 5% of their company, implying a $1 million valuation. With a rolling startup window, the time is always right for a good pitch. So if you're ready to work with the premier cannabis startup accelerator in the business, just open up gtwy.co. That's gtwy.co. All right, time for the blitz. Ohio's Dayton Daily News has a good story up about an interesting problem that every legal marijuana state has to deal with at some point. Where do you get the first marijuana seeds used to grow the first batch of legal cannabis? Since there are, legally speaking, no legitimate sources for cannabis seeds before a state industry starts up, lawmakers and state officials have to turn a blind eye when it comes to sourcing starting seeds. The phenomenon is so ubiquitous that it even has a well-chosen name, being the, quote, immaculate conception problem. As Ohio works to dip its toes into legal marijuana by building a medical marijuana system, the state's Department of Commerce is putting the onus of getting seeds on the cultivator's plate and not asking any questions about it. Rolling Stone has a good long-form piece up looking at how California's recent bout with wildfires has impacted cannabis cultivators. This is a topic we've touched on a number of times since the flames first got out of control, but Rolling Stone's article looks at how some cannabis farmers have faced institutional discrimination as they've tried to visit their farms and begin recovery work. The nation of Peru is moving to legalize the production and use of cannabis oil for medical purposes. According to Reuters, the Peruvian National Congress voted 68-5 at the end of last week on a bill legalizing cannabis oil. The country will craft the rules and regulations for its new limited medical marijuana program within the next 60 days. We'll report back as that plan coalesces. Speaking of countries working for more progressive marijuana policies, we have news out of Canada that the country's Minister of Health just said that funding was being issued to law enforcement officials for developing tools to determine if someone is too impaired from cannabis use to drive. In a press conference following a meeting with provincial health officials, Federal Minister of Health Jeanette Petitpas-Taylor said, quote, pilot tests are already being taken across the country to ensure that police are prepared to deal with that situation, unquote. Of course, there are currently no accepted scientific methods for determining if someone is too impaired from marijuana use to drive, so we'll see how things go there. Turning back to Maine for a headline, there's an interesting local piece up about how school board officials in the small town of Bridgeton are having to wrangle with medical marijuana use by students. With more and more states recognizing that medical marijuana's efficacies doesn't have any age limits, more school districts are finding themselves in the position of having to create rules for how student patients can take their medicine. This story, which turns an eye on Bridgeton's process, is a good one to read in full. Alan Brockstein over at New Cannabis Ventures picked up a second spot on today's headlines with his look at why Canadian licensed medical marijuana provider Aphria recently raised $80 million in funding through the sale of stock. In short, it's because the company wants to be flexible and in position to make big moves as adult use legalization comes online in Canada next year. And finally for today, the city of New York is being criticized for its disparate handling of kids caught with marijuana, specifically the harsher treatment it doles out to homeless kids caught with cannabis in shelters compared to how kids in city schools are treated. Kids in homeless shelters busted for weed are handcuffed and taken to a local police precinct to be locked up. In city schools, they are generally issued a so-called warning card. When asked about the different treatment facing kids, city officials passed the buck to the NYPD Police Department, who took over security details for the city's homeless shelters at the beginning of this year. Those are the headlines and news for the day. I'll be back with you again tomorrow with another information-packed episode of Marijuana Today Daily. But in the meantime, if you have any stories to share or feedback to give, zip us an email to headlines@mjtodaydaily.com. And while you're clicking around the interwebs, swing over to our Twitter account at mjtodaydaily and visit our website at mjtodaydaily.com to find links to all the news we cover. Thanks to our sponsor, the Gateway Cannabis Incubator, and to all of our awesome patron listeners for the support that makes this show possible. To join the illustrious ranks of the patron listeners yourself, swing over to our website at mjtodaydaily.com and click on that big blue button at the top of the page that says Become a Patron. I'm your host, Shay Gunther. Thanks for tuning in, starting your day with Marijuana Today.
One take, Shay. One take.